everyone, and a very warm welcome to all the participants here today. We are very excited to bring another session of Transog, where we are interacting with industry leaders and discussing some of the most pertinent business issues with context to the constantly changing business environment. So today again, we are bringing a fresh set of discussions and agenda for you, and something really exciting and pertinent to most marketers and customer relationship heads in the upcoming years, with the phasing out of customer tracking cookies and how you can better prospect and engage with customers. And to do that, we have an industry leader and a segment leader, United Health, amongst us, the leaders from them. So today I'm joined by my co-host, Mayank Jain. He is the principal North America for Transog Analytics. He's based in Minneapolis. Mayank comes with over 22 years of experience in human capital and transformation. And he's led various groups as well as Center of Excellences in workforce strategy and analytics areas for some of the largest companies across the world, like Ameriprise and Allianz. As the global head of the Workforce Transformation and Analytics Center of Excellence at Allianz Group, and as a member of his Global HR Executive Committee as well. Mayank has built and led similar functions in Providence Healthcare, Visa, and like I said, Ameriprise. He has been very instrumental in helping HR organizations derive the people strategy from business strategy and ensure execution of decisions based on analytics. He holds an MBA from IMT Ghaziabad. And my name is Shuchita Jain. I'm the VP of Client Development and Marketing at Transog Analytics. And I have collectively over 17 years of experience in providing thought leadership in advanced analytics, management consulting, and in consumer banking across North America, Middle East, APAC, and India as well. I typically work with business heads, CXOs, and functional heads in identifying their business use cases and business problems, which can be intelligently solved by using advanced analytics, machine learning, AI, and predictive analytics solutions. Some of the work that we are doing in Transog is revolving around customer marketing, risk, and operations analytics. And we have some very interesting use cases. I would request you all to visit our website to learn more about us. Quickly delving further bit about Transog, your host for today. We are a 14-year-old organization headquartered in India with global operations, a team of over 100 data scientists, analysts, and business domain experts servicing some of the largest brands across India and other geographies, with several global clients across key markets in different industries like banking, financial services, insurance, aviation, hospitality, consumer products, and other verticals. Some of the work that we do in this space revolves from advanced analytics solutions, working on structured and unstructured data in areas like customer marketing, operations, risk, and supply chain, to analytics consulting for clients that are starting the journey in analytics adoption. We also provide end-to-end services, helping clients using data engineering and cloud-based solutions, dashboards, business intelligence insights, and some fair bit of work in RPN automation as well. So why are we, sitting together and discussing this topic? Because there is going to be a fundamental change in the way the industry is tracking its customers and prospects. Initially, we have been so habituated to looking at cookie-based customer tracking and user behavior analysis. However, it has started to change already. Already, these changes have been implemented to some extent in Europe with the implementation of GDPR in 2016, where you need to take an explicit user consent before you can start tracking users through cookies. Way back in 2020, Google had already declared that it plans to eliminate third-party cookies from its Chrome extension, which is actively across Android as well as non-Android users as well. And of course, there has been some delay in implementation of that, but we expect it to happen as early as 2024. Now, why it becomes pertinent is by looking at the stats. We can see, for example, just last year, 2022, the average spend time that a global internet user was doing daily on the internet was close to 7 hours for different use cases, whether it is exchanging data, learning, knowledge management, socializing, for business, e-commerce, or even for entertainment. And almost 42% of websites in today's world use some kind of cookies to track their visitors and increasing their conversions by up to 300% by better utilizing this data for targeted marketing and engagement. Even 80% of advertisers rely nowadays on third-party cookies, and studies have revealed that around 32% of business decision makers are sweating the incoming change in terms of dropping of these third-party cookies.
The slide also went away.
I think our connection in general disappeared.
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, I think the point that Srichita was making is that 79% of consumers prefer contextual advertising to behavioral ads. And that, that's a key area why advanced analytics is so much more important. Now, there is a significant amount of trading of user data for access that happens as well. All right. I mean, we all know that a significant number of companies really monetize their data. I mean, if you think about, as an example, Tesla, one of their key strategic advantages is the amount of existing data, actual empirical data that they have, apart from other things, of course. Right. So over 521 billion, half a trillion was spent in 2022 on digital ads alone. Right. So with that, I think basically the point being that as privacy concerns grow, marketers need to adapt their strategies and find innovative ways to engage customers without relying on the more invasive tracking methods. And it's for that, it's really a pleasure. And I'm so glad that we have Honors, who is an expert, renowned expert in this area. He's done a lot of work in this, as I got to know, in my interactions with him. We have him here to talk about this, what they are doing in their company. So Honors, over to you. And I don't know if you are able to put the presentation on, or do you need help?
I can try and see if I can do that. Let's see. I believe probably this one. Let's see if this works.
I can see your screen, but I don't see the, yeah, there you go. Yeah, we can see it. Yeah. Thank you, Honors.
You can see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, because I don't see what I still see you on my screen. That's kind of interesting. All right. Well, does it advance and it shows an introduction and a picture of me?
Yes,
somewhere?
It does. It does. So it's your photo and introduction.
Well, Mayank and Shushita, thanks again for inviting me along for this. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, your customers, your employees on this topic. For those who don't know me, I work in UnitedHealthcare. I am leader of our data analytics team within what we call government programs marketing. I have 30 plus years of experience with analytics. I've worked in financial services, American Express, Amex. I've worked in commercial banking. I worked with private banks. I worked with insurers. And about 7 years ago, I jumped over and started working in healthcare within UnitedHealthcare here in the US. Education-wise, I hold an MBA from London Business School. Most probably familiar with that. And otherwise, my background is in marketing and management, education-wise. In terms of those who don't know UnitedHealthcare, it's sometimes presumptuous that people around the world know us. We're mostly a US-based, though we are in about 50 countries, but the majority of our revenue comes from US. We are a Fortune 5 company by revenue. It's well over 300 billion. We're still growing rapidly, 13% growth for our size. As sometimes fingers, we're still a large startup. We started about 40 years ago as a company. We serve 150 million consumers. We have 380,000 employees. It's a good sized company. I'm in one of the divisions of that. So the way we're structured, there is a UnitedHealthcare side and there is an Optum. People who are based in India might be very familiar with the Optum brand. I think we have 30,000 plus employees working under the Optum brand in India. But I am on the UnitedHealthcare side, which is the health insurance side. So we're kind of like signing people up and help on that front. and help them manage their health and the financial aspect of it. The Optum side is the actual care delivery. This is our physician clinics, this is our emergency rooms, hospital, etc. It's also all of the analytics around how do we improve the delivery of healthcare. So we're also a big consulting organization. It is payment services. So how do we facilitate the payment to both physicians from the individuals? And we have a financial services arm as well for individuals. That's all around the payment of that. But overall, it is all about healthcare. It's an end-to-end kind of like all the way from you sign up, you have a need to get insured, to the actual delivery of the healthcare. So you can imagine being a healthcare company, privacy and everything that goes around that is key to us. And that's why this whole thing of cookies and going away and the privacy legislation that's rolling out is so central, and why we're taking very proactive action around cookies going away as well. So we'll skip kind of like this part, just what we do, but we are marketing directly to consumers. So that's kind of, let's talk a little bit about the sort of what, I just want to give a little bit more context before we get to the actual analytics, what we do. What is precipitating this? There's actually two things. There's both the privacy regulation. So in EU, they have, it's referred to as the DPRD. It's basically all the privacy regulations around for consumers, around what you actually can collect, how you have to have explicit consent to collect the information. And that started happening in the US as well. For now, it's 5 states have adopted either the GPRD pretty much as it is, or in some adapted form, but it is in process in multiple other states. So in response, you'll see companies already, even they're US based and are not subject to the regulation, they're still going to come out, hey, is it okay I collect your cookie? You might see it with Indian companies too. You might see it in the Middle East if you go there. Everybody's expecting it's happening. And in some cases, you don't even know necessarily where the consumer sits. So the safe thing is to ask for that consent no matter what. Now you can do that in various forms, and we're not here to talk today about best practices for how you make that as least invasive, but there is a whole consulting arm around how do you make sure that it feels as seamless to the consumer as possible. So that's the regular side. The industry is pushing the other way. So we've talked about Apple. So she just said as well, right? Google's announced they're going to stop with the cookie as well, but Apple's already out of that. So anything on an Apple device, we're not getting anything. And as a US, they're close to 50% market share on the mobile phone. So this is real already now. This is not just about when Google eventually phase it out in the browser. People increasingly access anything from their phones. It's not just the Chrome browser as we think of it. So that's sort of teeing up what's happening. So it's both a pull as well as a push that's going on. Now, when we think of within digital, there's digital advertising, it impacts the channels very differently. Where this really matters is mostly in display and mobile when we talk about the cookies going away. That's where it's critical. So anything that is retargeting, that's the core where cookies are used today, right? You go to a website and immediately you give some information, and that is what's being shared around. And so your retargeted ads is where your first thing you see that will disappear over time, right? Anybody who's gone somewhere and searched on something or visited a site, let's say you're in the market for a car, we all see immediately everywhere car ads show up wherever you go, right? That's kind of somewhere between the retargeting. It could be contextual as well for how it shows up. That's where we see the most impact. We do think within there are some ancillary impacts. So in walled gardens, like the social media, whether it's on Meta, it's within some of Google's offerings, or within Apple's offering, those are the ones we think of as the big walled garden closed system. We do think there'll be some impact, not from the cookie itself, but the cost pressures, because you have to get out of, they're now the ones that sit with the best data. That means they can charge a premium. So we actually expect the cost to go up in some of those for us because they just have better data than most companies have. In paid search, probably not. If anything, it'll be more a function of, well, I can't spend my money on retargeting. Let me buy paid search instead. But we don't think that's really where it's going to go. We think there are other ways. The other place where we see it might happen a little bit of cost pressure would be on what we call connected TV. So think of all the streaming services, because you can lean into first-party data from those providers of the streaming services, right? Actually, I think they have an advantage because even over some of the walled gardens in some cases, because they know who the consumer is from a terrestrial, where they actually live. Google don't necessarily have your address. Most of theirs is penned around an email address and a phone number. Now, they may buy data augmentation to get at who you are, but they don't necessarily have the same as a billing address. Most of us never pay anything directly to Google, right? We are the product. It's Google selling us and our data somewhere else. So I think that you'll see some of these people who actually have the direct relation with the consumer in different ways will be able to charge a premium for some of their services. So that's kind of more where does it impact. I hope that's helpful context. So if we don't have the cookies, well, then we'll have to, which is what we always call third-party data, we'll have to rely on first-party data and partner for second-party data. Now, no one's talked about second-party data for the last 10 years. I actually think if you poll a lot of people, they'll have a hard time explaining what it is. Even internally here, we talk about that. So second-party data is literally just your access to somebody else's first-party data. We kind of skipped that for years and went straight to the third-party data with the cookies. It is now back in vogue because since we can't get the third party, which was the cheap way to get it, you got to find partnerships unless you have vast amount of first-party data yourself. Now, I'm in fortunate position as a marketer that I work for an organization that has 150 million consumers already as customers, and it's like half the country. So we have massive scale, which means I sit on a large amount of first-party data. But if you work for a smaller retailer or a B2B or whatever you're working in that's not as big, the only way to increase your first-party data is really getting second-party data partners. That would be, well, that's not the only way. That is one way. The other thing we haven't talked about for a while is what we call zero-party data, which is you actually not only just collect who it is, but you want to collect more information where the consumer actually self and intentionally provides the data, right? So you can do that in form of questionnaires, simple ways of what interests you as when they land on the page, and actually have them help you personalize the experience by answering a couple of simple questions. But that feeds into when we get into, okay, how do we actually model for this? What analytics techniques do we use? Well, you need more than just knowing who the person is. If I know it's Mayank, well, that doesn't tell me much. I can't target based on that. I need other data as well. Now, that can either be your own first-party data in your CRM. It can be second-party data where you get it from somebody else who has that knowledge about Mayank as the consumer. Or I can, on my website or in other forms, trying to collect additional information that Mayank would voluntarily give up if that is, right? So that's kind of how we would, but what's common for all of the zero, first and second party data, it's all consented to. In general, it's lower volume, right? We get not a lot of it, but it's high accuracy when we do get it because it's tied to the person uniquely. A lot of the third-party data we already had was very much an efficiency game. Lots of volume, very efficient use of the marketing, but it may not always be effective. I think we're switching to an effective game now, and it might not be as efficient, so higher cost per unit, but very, very well when you measure for outcome. So that's where we headed. In terms of the second-party data, so that is done via data onboarding services. And I put on here the name. We use LiveRamp. I think they're the market leader in this space. And you do that to maintain privacy. So imagine I had to exchange data with an external partner. Even if I requested consent, in general, I cannot share who that is. So you use an onboarding service that's sort of almost like a data program between, we anonymize any data before it leaves our premises. So we have an anonymization service in between us and LiveRamp. LiveRamp use the same. The third party in this case hold that key. We can still match up on the individual. Once it's inside LiveRamp's environment, the partner has also anonymized the data. So by the time we're several degrees of separation from even knowing who we are exchanging on, instead we get anonymized audiences. So imagine I just know this is person A, B, and C, but I know a lot about A, B, and C. What's important though in those cases, the level at which you exchange the data has to be such that it cannot be re-identified, because otherwise you pass the privacy regulation, right? So if Mayank has the biggest house in his Delhi suburb, I can't have that you give the house values in that data set, because then I can identify that's clearly going to be Mayank. You have to stratify your data in a way whereby you lump enough people together that you cannot go in based on that data in itself, re-identify who it is. So there's some limitations in terms of how you can build audiences, because they have to be in clusters that are big enough, or what might have been a core variable in your targeting models may have to be capped at certain values where it's not as predictive. So those are some of the considerations as you go through what kind of data you put in and what it means for what you can model. But this is how it's done. And then LiveRamp, we tag websites, we tag, and so does all of the publishers. And that's the way we get exposure. We call them exposure logs. Who has actually watched the ad, who has interacted with the ad, who has taken action. Now we can start stitching a picture together at an audience level for who is actually interacting and what the outcomes is. So the last page I'm going to sort of walk through here is just more the how. So now we get in, apologize up front, the page might look a little detailed, but let me kind of get at what the ideal is here. So when you use individual target models today, let's say if you did story, you'd know who it is on your first party data. But in this case, sometimes we use audience based. It really depends on scale and data quality, what you're capable of doing. So let me walk from left to right here. What I call one is known. I know who it is on my side of the fence. So I might have a database of, here's the 100 million consumers that I have in mind that we go after. I have a lot of data about them. It's usually a mixture of first party data, and then I buy in third party data as well. So we will all buy demographic data, census data, as we call it, all sorts of things, whatever you can collect. That's still game. But then once I go through, in our case, through LiveRamp, it gets anonymized. That's the data onboarding. At that point inside with the onboarding service, I can add second party data to enrich the data set further. But what's also important to understand here, the first step, when I anonymize and put it in, there is a matching process. So I put on here, I don't know if people see my mouse, but we have a partial of all the people I send in, they would be unmatched. And then the second step, when we deploy it out to, or here deploy it out to a publisher, there's a second match rate, right? So imagine Google has a set of names. They also has to exchange with LiveRamp. So I have my people, I match them into LiveRamp. LiveRamp has to match that over to Google, and we may not match at the same level. So there's a degradation of your data at each step. That's just unavoidable. Scale matters, and the quality of your data matter, and what data you collect. And each publisher has different data they match on, right? So Google, Meta, it's mostly based on email, maybe phone, because that's how they identify people, right? When you log into anything Google, it's your Gmail account or something similar. They may have your cell phone number as a backup mechanism for if you ever lost your password kind of thing. Same with Meta, right? It's not you. They don't use a terrestrial, we call it terrestrial in American English, your actual address. But if you go to like a streaming service, they might very well have your address. They may not have had the same email on you, but we can still match them. So the matching rates depends a little bit on how many matching options you have and what you can do. So one of the things we very concerted now is how do I increase my email pool? Because of Meta and Google is still so dominant, and Apple for that matter as well, in the industry, and you still need what they can offer in their wall guide and what they have in social. So that still matters. And then once we have deployed it, I can actually, now it comes back into my own system. I'll measure on the back end, right? So imagine I can develop a target group of people. That's my known target. Everybody who's done any kind of marketing, hopefully you all do holdouts, so you actually know what's the incremental value of what you do, not just tracking activity. I'll measure the known target on the back end, but keeping in mind, the more unmatched you have, the more contaminated what you're doing will become, because I can't tell if the unmatched got exposed, right? So even if I call them my holdout, they may still have been exposed unless you're very, very diligent about, you only run within a channel only at the people that you had targeted, and you hold everybody else out. But that's a challenge for us right now. That was not a challenge on the third party. So this is a new challenge in this case in the digital space because of that matching part. So that's kind of where we're at. But for us, it's a closed loop. I start with my own CRM data, I end with my own CRM data, and I live for someone. Now, we do have some campaigns that starts inside the onboarding service. So I might have campaigns we run jointly with one of our second-party data partners. So if they, for instance, give me here people who visited their website, and I know people who visit one of our partner websites, is very relevant for the kind of things we're offering. So those could be partners in the content space where people go seek out information about healthcare plans. I know that's people who are likely shopping, depending on where they're on their website. I'll feed that in. Now I start from that audience. In that case, I never knew who it was to begin with, but I can do modeling still within the onboarding service has modeling capabilities too, but now it's purely audience-based. There is no known target. It's purely a target audience at that point. But same modeling techniques apply. You still use machine learning if you can. I mean, well, we use everything from, first admit, we have some models, simple regression models, predictive. And part of that is the value of money. If I can do a regression model in 2 days, start deploying it, I create value in 2 days. If I have to spend a month getting a random forest model fine-tuned, I lost a month worth of opportunity. So that's sometimes a trade-off. So we usually start simple, and then you can get more advanced in terms of what kind of predictive modeling techniques you use. Because usually the more complicated, longer it takes to fine-tune it, longer time it takes to explain to your business partner why they should use it, because the more black box it gets as well. So that's those are some of our trade-offs. So that's kind of how we are building out for it. So it's a lot of our effort is in collecting the right data, setting up the right partnerships, building out machine learning and AI capabilities, both on our own side, on the CRM side, what I call the known number one, as well as with our within our onboarding service partner on our sort of more audience-based pieces. And then obviously you can always go to Google Analytics, etc., for what they had deployed as well. That's a third step where you can do things as well. But we've focused on 1 and 2 on our end. Okay. So that's kind of summary. We all know it. You can't rely on the third parties. As I said, it's mostly display and mobile. It will impact other things too, but that's where most of the impacts are depending on your marketing mix. you might have different ways in which you're hit by this. Rely on your first, partner for second. And as I said, large companies will have a competitive advantage unless you can amass a lot of second party, but even that will take time and resources to strike all the partnerships. And as I said, your trade-off between first and second is usually depending on your scale and the quality of your data. Those are the kind of key points that I want to make sure you take away from this. Good.
Thanks, Honors, for the quick view into what companies at your scale are doing. One quick question that I had for you is, with Google extending this deadline that further away, they will, but eventually these cookies will phase out. Do you anticipate businesses should start doing something about it now? Especially there are a lot of these e-commerce, companies that are heavily reliant on cookie-based tracking and all. Some of the smaller scale companies. What is your opinion? Like, what should be the action? What should be those areas of priority? Like, should they focus more on, like you said, collecting first-party data, which is tricky for small businesses, where the workings on their websites and apps is small, the footprint is small. Tie-ups, like you said, could sometimes end up being costly, especially with walled ecosystems like Apple and all. So what could be some ways in which these companies can look at building resilience in their marketing processes? What could be those?
Obviously, first of all, I would still make sure you collect the best possible first-party data, or try and get at zero-party. That should never discipline going away. But to your point, if you don't have the scale, find ways to partner on the second-party data. I absolutely encourage that. Try and figure out who do you have a value exchange with. And then what I've seen increasingly, there are marketplaces popping up for these things as well, right? So the onboarding services like LiveRamp will have marketplaces and there are companies that will sell their information in there. If any of you use Snowflake they have a marketplace. Ashley does. They will all eventually develop these marketplaces where you can buy in, maybe not always second, but at least third-party data that's sort of exchanged in some form. Anything that's cloud-based allow you to do that very rapidly and at a low cost. That's where I've seen the marketplaces show up. You can go back to contextual advertising too. It's getting a rebound. I was just at the Gartner symposium a couple of weeks ago. That clearly was one of the themes. How do you manage your contextual advertising? Yes, that's still very much usable. And you can do that. I mean, depending on your organization, whether you want to do it behavioral based or clickstream based, etc. That's in there too. And then I think we just have to get comfortable with the audience based as opposed to individual based. So some of your modeling techniques might change a little bit for how you do it. So a lot more emphasis on typical lookalike models, right? You might have to start creating synthetic data because you have gaps in your data sets. So you can do it predictive, what you think the data actually would have been. Those are other techniques you can use to try and fill in the gaps. But I'll be the first time in, like I said, I feel fortunate. I'm working for a big company. It's a lot easier. I have access to a lot more data. But as I said, there are marketplaces. I mean, any change is always not somebody's opportunity, and that tells me that somebody who has the data, eventually they would seek to monetize it. So seek out those marketplaces, find what's relevant for you, try and see if you can improve your modeling purely based on those. I mean, we're going through it ourselves too, by the way. It's not just for small. We have all of our third-party data that we acquire. That's out in request for proposal right now. Same deal. Last piece of advice, if you don't have an ID resolution internally, look at that too. At the end of the day, you'll have to work a lot of things on matching data across different data sources. So if you're buying in data, if you can't collect it yourself and you can't rely on the cookies, you have to resolve the identity in order to stitch the data together. So that's another core service you should be looking at if you don't have it today.
Right. And could machine learning and all be used for ID resolutions in such instances? Like you mentioned that.
Yeah, you can. We
identify individuals.
You can. We talk about too. So depending on what industry you're in and kind of how you're reckoning and the consequences of what you do, we talk about deterministic and probabilistic matching, right? Deterministic would be, I have your full name, address, date of birth, social security number, the whole thing in both record sets. That's clearly a match, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I have in one, it's S Jane, and the other one data set says Shushita Jane, you live in the same postal code. Maybe that's the same person. It's probably 99%, but at that point, it's not deterministic. It's probabilistic. Depending on your use case and application, you have to go deterministic versus probabilistic. We tend to go more deterministic because we're healthcare. You wouldn't like your record shared with somebody else. You don't want to be told you have a particular disease that you don't have. So there's certain things, or you don't necessarily want to see communication around things that are not relevant to you or would scare you. So we tend to try and build deterministic wherever we can. In some of our marketing, when people are not yet a consumer with us, yes, I can use probabilistic for those. It's more forgiving. But when you do the probabilistic, yes, all sorts of AI going into that, right? It's all about the patterns, the likelihood of that actually being the same person as you go through, right? How many times do you need to log in from the same device ID and IP address before I say, well, that is you, right? Now you've done it X number of times. I know it's you, right? With 99.9% likelihood. I hope that helps.
Sure. I do see one query here, but very quickly, Honors, one more opinion of yours before I ask audience questions. How do you suggest companies further improve their prospecting? At the awareness stage, because retargeting and all would certainly help sometimes. Now, like you mentioned, that retargeting will slowly disappear, and that's one critical area where you see an immediate impact. So how do you suggest businesses, improve upon that, especially when they're trying to build the awareness of their brand in front of new audiences in this context?
That's a very good question, because it's necessarily the retargeting, it's the low cost, high efficiency, right? It's simple to do. It doesn't take a lot of modeling. Exactly. All I'm doing is say, hey, I know you showed interest before. I'm going to keep marketing to you until you give in and buy my product. We are increasingly shifting to what we call journeys. So think of it as you're trying to stitch together what is actually the sequence in which the consumer interact with us across all of our channels. So if you recall the slide I put up with, there is the known part, my first part that I feed in. I'm actually going in and feeding into the on-point as well, information about what people have done in what we call our offline channels. Who have we sent mail to? Who has responded to our mail? Who has contacted our call center? Who have we had outbound call campaigns to? Who has interacted with some of our TV or where have we run TV? So we are feeding in all of the touch points, and then increasingly trying to build journeys of what is the right touch point. So instead of just going to retargeting, we're trying to figure out what is the next channel in which we want to market to that consumer. And that is very much a machine learning exercise of figuring out what is that path. It's almost like, some of you may have run random forest models, right? It's not too dissimilar from that, right? You're trying to figure out what is the best tree or node to follow. Don't have to use random forest techniques for it. Next, we have a lot of other things. And it really comes down to multi-touch attribution. Now, I've in the past stayed away from multi-touch attribution because I tend to find that marketers just keep hammering the consumer with more touches because they get a fractional credit for it. It doesn't necessarily add value.
Yeah.
And in part because we didn't have the digital imprint tied back to the individual, I can do that now with the onboarding service and the live-run tags. So I have a much better chance of actually now creating a full picture of that journey. So we're moving to, in short, journey-based, multi-touch. That's the way, and then try and figure out how much did they contribute and what order did you want to do it.
Right. So I saw one question which has been asked by one of the audience members, but it kind of is getting addressed in the answer that you just gave. She was asking about lead generation strategies that have been quite successful businesses that are now switching gears towards a cookieless era. You've kind of partially addressed that already. So I think we've overshot by a couple of minutes here, but any other queries from the audiences before we wrap up this session? Because these are clearly very good insights which Honors has given. I'll try to summarize some of those, but any other questions specifically with regards to prospecting, because that's the idea here. So not so much on customer engagement and customer experience management, which we'll delve at a later date, but today the focus is more on prospecting. Any other questions from the audiences? Okay, great. So, I think we're getting one more question here. In the absence of cookies, what are the data signals and should business focus on to identify? Is one of the questions which, one of the queries here is, in the absence of cookies, when we're not being able to track their website behaviors, are there any data signals or indicators which businesses can focus on to identify and qualify potential leads? So of course, you've talked a little bit about the second party data, these tie-ups with businesses which have the same kind of synergies as us. That would also partially address that. I think a classic example for that would be credit card companies tying up with airlines for the frequent flyer miles program, because there's a lot of insight, from the frequent traveler community that they can pull in when they're trying to sell their credit cards. But very, very quickly, Honors, any insights on that?
I'd say that, and again, there are companies that start selling. You may have heard the term retail media networks. So a lot of the large retailers is another way in which that data is sold. So think if you are manufacturing a consumer good, here in the US, you can go to Walmart or Target, Kroger's, all the big, they will tell you the data about that consumer as well. So if they hit your website or you have interacted with them, or they will tell you who is also consuming those kind of products, right? They can create the audiences for you. That's another way. So you're augmenting your own first party data, again, with second party data. The other part is you can enrich the experience on your own website, right? It's not just about getting them to the website, but as you get them to go through, you want to be very purposeful and very deliberate about how that experience is, so you can both collect more data on them, but also make sure that you understand where do they stop in the journey. We use a different technology, a company called Invoca, that allows you to actually know what web page they stopped on when they called into our call center. So, and then we look at what's the conversion rates on the back end of that. So, and who is it that didn't call in, right? So that in itself gives some away too. But is there something about the journey on your own website where you're not addressing a particular consumer need? So there's actually technologies out there that envelope, in this case, Invoca envelopes all the way from the search term till the call has ended. We can track that whole journey. So it becomes very powerful in terms of, what people searched on to actually what was the outcome, and you track those touch points in between. You collect a lot of data in that process too, and that's all your first party data to have. So it's not just about when they get to your website. There are technologies out and companies out there that's offering you that data as well. So yeah, you got to get creative on your data acquisition strategies. It's not much else around it.
And
Right?
also, do you think that this would lead to more focus back on other techniques like search engine optimization and, getting the right terminologies on for the connecting of the
Yes,
audiences?
there will be some of that, right? People have to go elsewhere. That's why I say
Yeah.
there will be some impact to search, but mostly it's going to be more expensive because people have to go there when they can't do the retargeting. You're looking at, but if you are going out buying a broader set of terms, it's important that you can track where it ends up, not just that they click through to your site, but where in your consumer experience did they stop? Does it really answer the question of, yeah.
One quick question here from the audience. Are there any specific industries that will be particularly affected by the shift to cookieless world? So do you anticipate some industries getting worse off or better off?
Yeah, it depends on consumer behavior. I think the biggest deal is the consent, right? That's part, and we obviously, for our part with healthcare, I'm not saying we're being hit more, but when you do sign up and exchange the data on for our part, even with second party, it's way more regulated and more restricted what we can share. That's why I have to anonymize anything, even before it leaves our premise. It's we have certain other regulations around what is regarded private health information. So my guess is healthcare and financial services has to think more carefully about how it's done. There are, if you're selling shampoo, that's not the focus of the regulators, right? That would be more product safety than actually how you sold the shampoo. So I think anything that's to do with people's financials or health tends to be the ones that where it gets more dicey.
All right, great insights, honors on. There's so much we've learned today in such a short period of time. I think one thing that has really stood out from this discussion is that companies have to put in a lot of effort to digitally engage with the audiences, collect more first-party data. Of course, ideally zero-party data where the audiences themselves are sponsoring that, and providing the data is the most enriched data, but the toughest to get. But the focus should be on at least improving their websites and all so that they can better capture this data. Second valuable insights you've shared today is, of course, identifying these right data partners, where you can have some kind of value exchange, and start collecting and integrating more second-party data, which the industry had kind of not seen and focused on for the last few years. But now with this change in the world, it will have to look at this and also explore certain marketplaces. You've given an example of Snowflake, where these kind of data sets could be made available. Third broad area you also mentioned were things like retargeting might get phased out, but one way that marketers can work is launching more of contextual ads, exploring different techniques which are more audience-based versus individual-based targeting, exploring other machine learning modeling techniques like lookalike modeling, perhaps looking at integrating some synthetic data to improve the model performance. Another big area for focus for marketers would be ID or entity resolution, which is matching the data sets. Of course, there will be some decay in the data quality. Like you mentioned, there could be some potential unmatches. However, it makes sense to make investments in that. Lastly, you've talked a lot about how you can improve the customer's website experience, make it more purposeful, more deliberate, enrich their experience, and really map out their behavior journey, their interaction journey with the brand across multi-channels, whether it is digital or offline. And so that instead of narrowly not retargeting them in certain channels, which used to be the case through these third-party cookies, the customer has a very integrated and beautiful experience across different channels. So great insights. Thank you, Honors, once again for taking the time out to meet us. And I apologize for some technical issues that I faced. I don't know, my screen froze and it dropped. Zoom dropped. It's rarely if ever it has happened with Zoom. So apologies for that to the audiences as well. I'm hoping that everybody's learned a lot about how the world is slowly changing in this direction. If there are any questions which remain unanswered, please feel free to share it with my email ID. It's available on our company's website. I'll circle back to you with Honors feedback and input. But thank you once again, Honors, for this wonderful session and great takeaways. Mayank, anything you would like to add before we close the session?
Just very quickly, Honors, it's just fascinating to hear you. You live in such a fascinating world. I mean, it is amazing to hear how the various solutions that you guys have thought through to go around the issue of privacy and regulations and whole host of just improve your models and targeting. Fascinating. Thank you so much. Learned a lot.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Honors. I'm looking forward to more interactions like this in the near future. And thank you, audience, for listening in. We're looking forward to more such sessions with you in the near future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. Wonderful.